Welcome everyone to this interesting session. So this is Strathmore Business School, and we are very excited to have you on board as we tackle one of the major issues that might be a solution to the COVID-19 crisis and how it's affected businesses. So that's basically big data analytics and the governance of it, or rather how it supports governance. So we're going to be discussing ways on how to maximize its values and also avoid the risks that may come as a result. Because any time you see data, then you also have to always ask yourself, like, what are the risks? And I'm joined by a very interesting panel. So we have Mr. Julius Mwangi Ndegwa, who's an executive at Isuzu, and Dr. Ruth Massey, who's an academic in the UK, and Dr. John Olukuru, who's also a colleague here at Strathmore Business School. So I'm going to give them a moment to introduce themselves, but before I do, just to give you the background. So Dr. Olukuru will be, for this session, will be helping us understand big data, basically the main concepts, how big data has assisted in the management revolution, because management is not what used to be, how it used to be, say 20 years ago. That is 2 decades back. Things have changed. So he's going to help us see how we can be more transformative, especially at this time of COVID, using big data. And then Mr. Julius Mwangi, who has significant experience in board management, will be looking at the government aspects in relation to big data. That's the application, asking us, he'll be helping us understand, for instance, how can the board be more informed in steering the organizations through big data, especially at this time. For instance, you can think about a company like Kenya Airways. All the planes have been grounded, you know. How does the board at that juncture assist in that issue? Or if you might think about a company that does fast-moving goods, how are they able to reach their customers? Are they able to know like what people really need at this time? Because one of the things that happened when COVID came, people were told to change their behavior, especially when it comes to spending. So how do you adjust that? Do you have data that will help you know what to produce, or are you using your gut feel? And what are the risks in doing that? And then we'll have ethics and privacy issues being discussed by Dr. Massey. So this is her domain. She loves talking about risks issues. We'll look at the data that we're talking about, because one of the things that Dr. Olukuru will be telling us is, for instance, the characteristic of big data, that one of them being that it's very voluminous, you know, so, and it also comes in at a very fast rate, which is what we call velocity. So basically, there are issues here. We are handling customer data. Most of the organizations, some of them have become quite big, or if you are advisors or consulting firms, we are assisting organizations that are dealing with a lot of data. So how is that data stored, and how do we ensure that the customer's data is not put at risk? So I'll start with Dr. Massey. She can introduce herself and tell us what she has to share today. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Massey.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. Just a short introduction from me, really. I'm in the UK. I work for Cranfield University, which is, we work quite regularly with Strathmore Business School, so I'm delighted to be here as part of that partnership. My area is cyber resilience leadership, so I look at cyber as a management problem. Whilst it's a technical issue, it really is for management to think about and to understand. So my research looks around those areas. I spend quite a lot of time with particularly our MBA students, educating them around what is the role of management in relation to digital cybersecurity. So okay. That's a quick introduction to me, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll ask Mr. Julius. I've called you doctor, so I think you need to work hard and have that.
Thank you for even insinuating that I should be a doctor. Quick introduction for myself. I'm a CPA. That is my professional background as a CPS. Also done CISA, CIA, CCSA, CRMA, that is about risk management, and also fraud examination, CFE, and also become an MBA. Having worked a lot in governance as a company secretary here at Isuzu East Africa, and also done a lot of training with the Institute of Certified Public Secretaries on governance. But currently, and very interestingly, I'm now working as a functional director, responsible for all the vehicles you see, the Isuzu vehicles you see, and also all the people who sell the vehicles in East Africa. So welcome and thank you.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Dr. Olukuru, I had to leave him behind because he's part of the house. So we had to welcome visitors first. Right.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul Meunier. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Thank you very much. Yes, at least as you say, we are at home, and I'm very glad that we have a good audience, and thanks to the rest of the panelists for joining us today. As Meunier has just mentioned, Dr. Meunier just mentioned, we are going to talk about big data. So my name is John Olukuru. I think I can see a number of people in the audience. We've known each other for a while. I've been Strathmore for a number of good years. But interesting is, after being the Dean of School of Finance, Applied Economics, I started up this initiative in data science. So 2016, we began a research group, a research center in iLab Africa, and that's the data science and analytics. And we've been trying to do a number of things with Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Any visualization you find there is the little contribution we've made, which was a World Bank project. We've done a number of things with UBS, and then a number of stuff which we'll talk about them as we continue with this. We also now have a new center in Strathmore Business School. We call the Strathmore Africa Data Analytics Center, just to try and see if we can bring data for the good, for the common good, for the social good. And that's what Strathmore really stands for, that we do something that will always be able to impact the society. I know people who've done CPA remember very well, Strathmore was the forefront to start accountancy, because at that time, the city council requested for locally trained accountants. So we're looking forward to also see if we can share a lot on this idea of big data. What can you benefit from it today? I've been participating in other webinars, and it's good to be back home. See if we can add something to our own sector here. Thanks, Paul.
Welcome, Dr. Olukuru, and you'll be the first one to speak. But before we get to you, I want to have a special mention to Dr. Bitangendemo. I see you are on board, and we have around 85 participants, and more people are joining. I can see the waiting list has a few people, so it will be a very interactive session. Please type your questions as we go. If it's a large question, I'll definitely ask you to elaborate further, or if it's not very clear to us. That can happen as we go. And so the format of this particular session, at least for the first 30 minutes, Dr. Olukuru, Mr. Julius, and Dr. Mercy are going to first give an overview of their topics, and then we shall open up the panel for discussion. However, they will also be looking at the chat. So if there's a question that comes that's directly related to them, then probably they can also respond to that. But that ideally will happen at the end. So Dr. Olukuru, the first question to you, or rather to open this discussion, there's this issue about big data and management. So there's a lot of management has experienced a lot of revolution, yeah. And even at this time, especially during this time of COVID, we have seen organizations being forced to rethink on how they do, because it's no longer business as usual. Not every organization has the ability to ask government for support because it's hard times. And there are organizations that are actually making their sales have actually increased, or rather their profitability has increased thanks to COVID. A good example, and sorry for going global, like now, for instance, when you think about Amazon sales have increased significantly. When you think about our mobile providers like Safaricom, they have not been largely affected when it comes to, for instance, communication revenues. M-Pesa, I'm not sure about that, but they've also been doing a lot of support, like now, for instance, sharing money among the disadvantaged communities. They are part of the people that are helping in that distribution. So there's a lot that's going on. So in your view, how is big data assisting in management revolution? And maybe big data to start with. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. At least you've already broken a few things there, but I'd just like to also comment to see, it's wonderful to see Professor Ndemo within, and also just one of our big partners, Ben Roberts. Karibu sana. Now, I will start by having 2 or 3 quotes here. One, I just had someone saying, you can have data without information, but you cannot have information without data. That's something that maybe can really outline our own entire discussion here. And even what's happening today globally narrows down to the next quote. I just want to comment also that now we can see the whole world has just become one big data issue. That there's huge data set out there. As you commented at the beginning, it's huge volumes of data coming at very high speed, because now people are staying at home, people are locked within this lockdown scenario, and you have to now rely on technology. And now technology is making us to be data agents. And with that, I have now the third quote just to start it off also, that if you allow data to speak to you, then you can really be better informed. And with that, we start with the same thing I always tell a few board of directors when I'm speaking to them. To demystify the whole idea of big data, because sometimes people say it's really just a hype. In reality, it's not, because we are in that data era, as Jakuma will always say. We are in that big data era because the volumes are huge. The speed is quite unbelievable. The variety is coming from all kinds of scenarios. And sometimes you realize businesses, organizations always concentrate on data that is structured. We only look at the financials. That's what we always focus on. But there's a lot that's hidden in the unstructured data. And that's what's just happening today. I think we were trying to do something with the Ministry of Health. We are still trying to go through a number of things. I know people are panicking when they saw Google releasing the API that your phone can now give you a notification if you're closer to someone who's been tested COVID positive. But realize all that is data. Just see, can you listen to that data? Can you give it a chance for data to speak to you? Then you realize what kind of information that can be there. And sometimes you tell people what kind of revolution then that is there. That organization can have an opportunity to move from being data denial. That is, you distrust data. You can always avoid it. Give it any chance, you'll avoid that data set. Can we now start moving to be data driven? You always look at the data and you think this is what will shape our decisions. This is what will shape what we're going to do through. And I think I'll wish to put it under 3 or 4 pillars that now I think we've really been properly disrupted. Can we start thinking of data strategy if we never had one at all? Can we start thinking of our data architecture? Okay, how have we organized our investment towards really tapping into these raw materials? Because I think it was the CEO of IBM who said, data now is the real raw material of businesses. How are we prepared to really tap into that? Companies that you've mentioned that are really managing to go through today have really done that before the COVID-19. They were ready to go through. Thus, we find e-commerce platforms have really benefited a lot. So data strategy, data architecture. Then you realize there's always something about data culture. How do people view data? Okay, and this comes from the board to the CEO, to the managers, to the person on the ground there. Do they always realize that they are generating data, and the more credible the data they're generating, the more credible the decision making is going to be? And finally is the data analytics, which I think we'll talk about later on, to realize that people will say data is the new gold, or data is the oil, the new oil. But I always try to add something else. I'm not remembering where I read this. It's still crude oil. The oil we have in Turkana will not really be usable. It has to be taken to the refinery, refined until it becomes the petroleum for you to have it in your car. So having data is not just enough. Can it be placed in a format that can be understood? So during the COVID, I think people have just been alerted. Technology has disrupted everyone. And technology, IoT, AI, machine learning, all that entire digital mindset ends up generating data. Are we utilizing the data? So someone will say, data is the new science. Big data holds the answer, but the question has to come from you. Are you asking the right questions to your data?
Right. And even before we get to asking the right question, are you capturing that data to start with? Because that's one of the main things. Probably there's a lot of, and there are companies which have taken advantage of this. They've been collecting data for a very long time, and now that COVID has come, then they have competitive advantage because of that. There's Peter Drucker and Edward Deming. They say that you cannot manage what you don't measure. And that is something that's very profound, and it also relates to what you're saying, that data is still crude oil, So there's the issue of when Peter Drucker is trying to tell us, like, you need to start collecting this data, which is now related to measuring. And then there's also that issue where you're talking about, like, data is still crude oil. And now, even as we think about that, especially from an African perspective, yes, we have corporations which are multinationals, but then we have a lot of local companies. So in that, with that in mind, what is the role of big data in business before and after COVID? Like, how are we supposed to transform ourselves? Old practices versus new practices. You talked about culture. So how should we change? You talked about a strategy. Like those are very, very good, or rather they sound like they're very easy to do. Having a data strategy, very easy to do. But now what about changing culture? But even as you're changing culture, you need to ask yourself, like, what role will this data play in my business? So in your view, from an African perspective, like, what role should big data play?
Thank you very much, Paul. I think we'll be going very much in detail. It will be my whole entire big data course. But I'll just comment on a few things here, that when you talk about culture, when you talk about strategy, you talk about architecture, and then we look at the entire analytics process. So for the moment, I think the best thing to realize is for people to realize, first of all, as you said, what kind of data set are we having? Can you be able to realize that just that data is as raw as it is? Do you appreciate, first of all, that I need to process that data? So start thinking, what kind of tools do I have? Do I need to invest in it? Does the executive have the necessary resources to convert that data into information? Now that's just another first step. So what else do I need to do? Can I convert information into knowledge? That is, what do I understand from that given information I've got from my data before you start making the decision? So that's just one particular thing. There are three things that I wanted also to comment, which is to come to analytics, but I can bring it now. Two major data sets that's just going to make a difference for all given organization. One is the HR analytics. It's always easy to look outside and we forget looking at the internal data. And I was just reading, in fact, it was my Safaricom class that I was just training this afternoon, who told me, at the end of the day, if the employees are not happy, the customer will not be happy. So what are we doing with HR data? Are we able to realize that, yes, fine, people are losing jobs, you're going to lay off people. What kind of talent are you going to get away there? When the financial crisis came in 2008, banks laid off all the possible quants, but they realized when the crisis will end, you'll hire them at a certain higher price. So people have to really look at that HR analytics. What kind of talent do I have? Identify them. Are you able to still attract those ones who are being led from other different companies? How do you retain the most valuable one? The other data set that people have to really think through now is the marketing analytics. Of course, sales comes in. And that's where if we were doing a traditional way of always you have to wait for the customer to come to your place, now we have a challenge. We really have to have a challenge because we realize if we do not have an online presence, then this is the time to start thinking, rethink your kind of business model. What's happening there? And of course, that brings in the marketing mix analytics. How do you reallocate your resources? Because now the time has changed and you realize people are saying, this is the new normal. We're not going to go back to whatever happened before COVID. This is the new normal. How do you think of your market analytics? Competitor analytics, what have they done that's not good for us? We're now on Zoom. Before COVID, we were all with Skype. Before that, okay, Microsoft Teams is there, and everyone is looking at different scenarios. What are there? Let's look at competitor analytics. Of course, the market trend analytics, people have been looking at it. So I will say at the moment, with the three aspects of the strategy and the culture, it starts thinking of what kind of important data sets we're supposed to be looking for. That data is what will give you the best information, the best knowledge that will give you the greatest wisdom you need in your decision making. I will stick at that at the moment because the issue of culture influences, one, the way we capture the data set. Okay, how am I going to have it? Of course, with my friend from Liquid, we'll always go for IoT. Excellent. But if you do not have a good employee who appreciates that those sensors will do the best thing for them, and they start feeling it is a spy for them, you won't get the credible data. It will be spoiled. So people have to appreciate how we are getting in the data. That fellow is always there at the entrance, filling in the form of the visitors coming in. If you automate that process and the person appreciates, automation is not taking away my job. It's just making me more efficient. It's making me utilize my thinking, my intellect as a human being other than doing the routine job. If they appreciate that, quality is added to the company. So you realize it's a kind of a behavior change of which takes back to the company. Start with the why. Why do we need to get all this data? Why do we need to get all these analytics? Why do we need to get all these processes to ensure we are getting better decision making? So I think from the board level, we'll come in and see what support have we given the ExCo. Does the CEO has everything that we need to really know to get everywhere? People think of big data, they think of dashboards. And you're like, okay, it's just visualization. You've only described what you're supposed to be doing there. Can you start making analytics work for you? Paul, sorry, I can keep on speaking. If I forget, I'm not in class. Sorry for that.
Right, thank you. So I think the one takeaway is that big data, when you're talking about management revolution, is that it is helping us to measure value. And the best example I think I got from your talk is that one of measuring the value of the employee within the organization. They are an asset, but do we know how much contribution they're making and how much loss we will get if this person is no longer there? So, and for you to make that decision, actually, you need data from very different sources. And there are examples about this. Like now, for instance, Andela, is it 20% of their staff have been laid off and they have closed all their physical offices and everyone is working from home? I mean, I don't know whether that decision was based on data, but they are a technology company. So I hope that decision was made based on data. And the one question that I can ask as I get into my conversation with Julius is, how many organizations are actually using data for decision making? You know, and if not, if there are not many, is COVID making a lot of these organizations now move into the use of data, which talks to the issue that Dr. Olukuru was talking about culture, like where we are seeing that the culture within management has shifted. So, Mr. Julius, or Dr. Julius, so just tell us governance in perspective. Yeah, just give us a perspective of governance, especially from the executive level. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. And once again, thank you for continuously calling me doctor. That's a good aspiration. So let me pick from where Dr. Okuru has come from and talk about the governance here, and especially so pre-COVID and now as a new normal. How and what is governance so that we are all in sync? We simply define it for the sake of this discussion, how organizations are directed, controlled, and held to account. I'll come to that very fast. And it is how the power in an organization is exercised over resources and trying to maximize the value for the stakeholders. Now, before I go further, how do you direct an organization now, control it or hold to account? The governance keyword here is holding to account because you are doing it on behalf of others without having the data to talk to you, data to guide you, data to give you insights on the best way to direct in the view of the ground which has shifted. The ground which we had before is so I would make a decision, normally call people for a meeting, discuss one-on-one, look at the eyes, whether the decision is good or not. Now here the board are called upon to start making decisions, to start looking at controlling the organization, even without the advantage of a historical element of seeing the person you are talking to one-on-one. So in this era of COVID, that is the new normal, the board still has the responsibility and the leadership role of ensuring the value for the organization is protected. And let's get back to how the value organization is maintained, eroded, or enhanced. It is enhanced and it is maintained through decision making. So the board need to help and to guide the organization by utilizing the data to make the best position possible. And for the board members who are here and listening and the people reporting to the board, and not traditionally when this great shift in our development come, the board need not to fear the new normal, and the new normal both in the COVID era and the new normal both in the governance. That is, you have to manage with the data. Only thing you need to do is to understand it, to appreciate it, and to take the lead, because even with the best data information analysis, the leadership is still critical to harness all those resources to achieve the corporation objective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So one thing that I get is that the board can use this data to assist in making more informed decision making. But the one challenge, like what are usually the challenges of board leadership? One of them that I can see as an outsider is that these are people who are not technology savvy, and probably even if this data has been generated by using big data, it's going to be printed somewhere and then the guy is given a printout. So they are not able to analyze at a higher level. All they can do is ask questions and then information is generated. Like, how can they be able to steer that so that the organization uses big data for decision making?
Oh, thank you once again. One of the critical role of the board is the role of strategic planning, mm-hmm. and monitoring the strategic plan and the execution. And also one other role which I'll get to, more deeply is on challenging the management decision. And to make it clearer and easier for the board, so that because in this world of the data analytics, data management, information management, there is a maturity model. Not all organizations are going to mature at the same level. And you are out there thinking, now I am here as a small organization, and you're talking about this data, what this animal you're talking about data. And I just wanted to demystify and help the board members to quickly start seeing, even as they are now, they may be in the world of data, but they are not sure about it. And to start seeing, because you have started it and you are already in it, how are you going to direct and to help the organization move forward further? So traditionally, what has been happening is we have been using data to solve normal problems. Are the account reconciled? Are the financial statement clear? Is the marketing initiative and the sales initiative working? You get the monitoring data. And then also we used to use a lot of gut feel because of the experience of the board and the management, use the gut feel or the experience to make decision. But now you have been told here, things are shifting so fast that whatever you knew yesterday is no longer relevant today. So how do you move away from here? How you move away from here is one of the critical role of the board is to help in the structure of the organization. You need to structure the organization to start having people who are employees who are responsible for helping you make decisions and direct the organization through data usage. That's where we come in with somebody like a chief data analyst, the person responsible for the data. And where would this person be? This is a person who is relatively just a step lower from the CEO. Because this person, you need him to have a bird's eye view, holistic view in the whole organization, and to help you move away from masking and leaving a bit of the data, and helping you making the decisions, and to quickly put out there what is the role, what is this role of the analyst officer. The role would be like. You can start from the conventional data management, protection, data privacy. That can be the start. As you use it traditional for making solving the normal problems. And you ask yourself, this is not just a nice to have thing. It's a reality. You are going to live with it. So you need to have it and to provide for it as the board members. And because you are always also to manage the resources and to apply the resources you have. And you need to apply it by having this person doing the work. And what will this person help most when you start maturing? Because I'm talking about the organization starting somewhere, using data to solve problems, moving to a deeper level of data, the data being the one being protected, being organized. You need to insist and to have in the strategic plan and the policy of the organization a data management policy. What is the strategy? What is the strategy guiding data management in the organization? Once you have that, you'll be sure as a board, everything else from the CEO, from ExCom, and from other management, everything will start falling in place. So for the board members who probably do not know about the data, who are in the area world where decisions were made differently by discussing, by not showing what is the market saying, what is the new activities, and like the people who are, and like the organization which are here from the financial sector, you have a lot of data from anybody who is interacting with you. How are you using that data? Like now, your core is setting what? Is setting loans. If I ever took a loan with you, how can you even use predictive data to help you make more sales of their own? And that's where the board needs to come and challenge management in those decisions. That's why I said one of the critical role of the board is challenge management decision and challenge them how much are you using the data we have in the organization, data outside there to make decision and to increase sales, to innovate, and to also move from where we are to the new normal and adapting to the new normal. Thank you, Dr. Paul.
All right, thank you. So one of the things, and I like how your conversation has merged very well with Dr. Olukuru's, because you talked about a data strategy, you talked about a data management policy, and then the very important thing, touching on culture, because you talked about culture. So when you're looking at it from a board perspective, so the board is actually enforcing this, because one of the things you said is that we need to insist that the organization has to be data driven. So that's a very good thing. And then the other thing that I've seen is that there are new roles being introduced in the organization, of course, and borrowing from your point that not all organizations mature the same. An example is like now, and I'm using this because I have an idea, is Absa Bank. So Absa Bank, they have a chief data officer, right? And is a very senior person. And other organizations, even Safaricom, the funny thing is that you might think that some of these organizations are data driven by nature, but they still need to have a chief data officer. You know, they might have different or varying names, but that is a very critical role. And the other thing that is important, which now again addresses the issue of culture, is where is this person positioned in the organization? So that for me, I think is a very important thing. And there's something also to do, just to point what Dr. Ndemo is saying, is that we need to make sure that the data that is coming in, one of the things that Dr. Olokuru said is that data is coming in at a very fast rate, veracity, you know, the data is in large volumes as well, you know. So when you think about it that way, we need to get data analysts who are working with the chief data officer who are able to simplify this data in a way that is palatable, you know, such that the management is able to make very fast decisions, is able to turn around things. And these are guys who are actually looking at this data for additional insights. And then we are moving away from rules of thumb. One of the questions that I'm still having is, how many organizations in Africa are actually data driven? And they're not using gut feel. So Dr. Mercy, before I get to you, I just want to make everyone aware of the different organizations that are here. And I've tried to categorize them based on the per sector. So like now we have EABL, Serengeti, Carbaseed, that's beverages and food processing. We have Safaricom, that's representing telecoms. We have media entertainment. We have that's MultiChoice, Standard Group. We have insurance companies like Sinton, UAP, Britam, Canon, Simba Corp. Some of them are actually, that's why I did categorize them as insurance stroke investment. And then you have quite a number of banks, from Family Bank to Standard Bank to Coop Bank to NMB to KTB to Citibank, Zambia and Uganda. And then you have logistics like House of Procurement, and then advisory like PwC, Adili, and PKF. I mean, there's quite a number of organizations. So there's a reason why I've listed these companies. So the reason why I've listed them is because when you're thinking about risk, the risk that these organizations face is very different. So from a strategy perspective up there, that might be similar. Every organization might have a data strategy, they might have a management policy, they might have a chief data officer, but now when it comes to the issues of risk, the risk is not the same. Yeah, some of them carry a larger burden than others. So Dr. Mercy, I don't know, you have a very huge task here, but I know you're up to the task. So
thank you.
I'll actually start with a very easy question, like how was privacy before and during, how was privacy before COVID? And perhaps you can even talk about that during. The challenge is you're a researcher, so probably there's not even sufficient data.
Fortunately, I have an industry background, so yeah, so I can pull on both. Privacy is a really big issue. It's one of the things that we struggle with quite extensively. So, for example, pre-COVID, there was lots of conversations, particularly in the UK, and I'm afraid I'm going to take a UK view on this, but I think that there's lessons to be learned as well. We were subject to the European regulations around what we call GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulations. We still are, even despite the divorce from Europe. we still think about data as being something that we as individuals have the right to privacy on, which is important, and I strongly agree with. But then we start developing apps for track and trace for COVID. If this had been a physical meeting, there's 108 of us in this meeting room right now. I would have needed to know something about all 108 of you, physically where we were all together, where did you then move on to, your contact details, how to get hold of you. But these are all in many ways also privacy issues, because where I go and who I talk to is something that is a private concept. And I think something, worldwide we can kind of get on board with the fact that we all have a right to that level of privacy. But then you have COVID, and you have this desperate need to be able to track and trace, and it's important, and you look at the countries that have done that well, and actually, you've had to balance that need for privacy for the individual with the need for public good. And that's a really, really stretching discussion for anybody who's looking at privacy as a risk to the organisation. Now, COVID's obviously changed an awful lot. We're not quite on lockdown, but we're pretty much all still working from home unless we have to go in. So our concept of boundaries have changed as well. My boundaries used to be where I worked, where I interacted with people, and now my boundary is very much my home. But I'd like to welcome all 108 of you into my office and my home. So, our levels of difference as to how we perceive privacy has really taken quite a shaking over the last few months. And that shake will continue on through, because we need to think about the what ifs and the contingencies. So we've got quite a lot of issues around that. I also wanted to circle back to something that Dr. John said right at the beginning of his about data and information. Now, if I've got data, and I'm going to walk you through an example here, and this is an example I use with my students quite a lot. I've got something, it's red, it's got some pips, it looks like it's got a skin on it. I can probably, from that, guess that that's probably a tomato, which is a bit of information. So I've taken those 3 bits of data and I've turned that into some information. My knowledge is that tomato is a food, which is great. I can eat it. It's safe to eat. It's not going to kill me. But then we've got the next step, which is turning that into wisdom. And in the case of a tomato, the wisdom is that a tomato goes in a salad. It doesn't go in a fruit salad. Now, that sounds like a really simple example. It's really straightforward. I can see a few of you giggling over that. Now, if I took away and just said it's red and it's got pips, I might think that it's a strawberry. And that strawberry would then go in a fruit salad, not an ordinary salad. Now, that sounds really, really minor, and it is a bit of an entertaining example. But if somebody has got into my data and taken out or changed the yes, no to it having a skin, I'm then putting a tomato in a fruit salad, and I'm putting a strawberry in an ordinary salad. Now, again, it's a very, very simplistic example. But what that tells me is if I don't secure my data, if I let somebody else get into my data sets, or I purchase, and we do a lot of purchasing data sets, if I purchase other people's data sets and merge them in with mine, if they have some poor data validity in theirs, or I have some in mine, when we merge them together, I'm just going to have a bigger pile of what we would call garbage in, garbage out. So rubbish in the data set means that rubbish on the decision making. So when I'm thinking about the cybersecurity, I've got to think on the big scale. I've got to think about my organization and how to protect that. But I also need to think about, in this case of these particular data sets, how do I think about them? How do I validate what I'm doing on that? And that then leads me into thinking about, well, okay, so I've got this great bit of data. I know I've worked out that from this it's a piece of fruit. But what I do with that is where we start talking about, we move sort of from the cusp of talking about risk around data and data analysis into the ethics around it. And this comes back to the conversation around privacy. So if I'm thinking about the ethics of, should I put it in a salad or a fruit salad, well, that doesn't really matter. But when I'm actually talking about what do I do, what risks do I take for my organization based on this data set? So we're now talking about at the corporate level, we're thinking about, I'm going to make big strategic decisions that will impact my staff, my customers, these kind of things. I need to be thinking about, well, what was the question we asked of the data? Did I ask whether it was edible, or did I ask if it was red? Very different, what I would do with that data could be quite different. So actually I need to think about what data has gone into that data set and how we got that and what the privacy issues and whether we have a right to that data. We talked already about the data that's in your HR systems. Well, have you actually asked your employees whether or not you can analyze that data? Do you have their personal authority? We've collected 109 people's worth of data in joining this conference. It's probably only your emails and minimal data. But in HR, we have a huge amount of data, but do we have the right to actually use that? So we have those ethical issues on that side. We then put it through AI, machine learning, whatever data analysis processes, into beautiful visualizations, all of these things that we do with it. Then something comes out, and it is the job of the board and the culture that they engender in the organization to say, well, that's all very well, but what am I actually going to do with that? Is it right to deal with that? We've seen this used in, for example, America with stop and search processes. The data says I should stop and search this process. It's the individual police officer's responsibility to say, well, hold on, is the data saying that because they fit a particular social profile, or is it because they're doing something that I think might be illegal? And actually then what we do with that data is really important. So to pull back just into Julius's comment about decision making and belonging to the board and the culture, well, actually it's more than that. Between the average data analyst and the board, there is normally at least 5 levels of management. If you think about your base data analyst within an organization, that is 5 gatekeepers who will strip out what they think is either right or wrong, and they will apply their gut feeling to that data. So whilst that's not data security, it really is a risk in how you're applying that data. So we need to think about all of these things in the round. So I think that's probably enough for me to start off with.
No, you're not off the hook. So I like the example you gave of the tomato, especially when you say that someone gets into your record and removes one property, and that makes that difficult to judge whether it's a tomato, right? So that's a very interesting thing. So one of the things that I was asking myself is, like, for those changes, how do you secure that data so that no one comes and does something like that? And then on top of that, and this is something that might go to Dr. Olukuru, is do we have, because now we are talking about big data, yeah? I see Ben Roberts is talking about data. It's actually large. Sometimes it's in silos, So when you're thinking about it that way, that's another property now that you'll need to think about when it comes to security. So this data, one is that it can be interfered with. Second, it might be in different places, or rather coming from different sources. But then also something else that's very interesting is that issue of measuring the truth out of data, such that if someone removes a record, are we able to, and that's now where I'm bringing Dr. Olukuru, he'll give a comment after you've spoken, is are we able to check the truth by combining different data sets so that now we can verify, or are we going to be now forced again to use our rule of thumb? You analyze and you say history, how my mother showed me, or rather explained to me, is that this is a tomato. The data might be saying it's something else, but this is a tomato. Dr. Marcy, what's your thought?
They're all complex questions, and like Dr. John, I can spend a long time in front of my students. I could do a whole 2-day course on that. The point being is the fact that it's incumbent on the organisations to ask the questions, and to ask questions around when the data comes out and it's surprising. That can be really valuable for the organisation, because one of the things we're finding with big data is the fact that it does give us these insights that we could never possibly have had before. But it's also incumbent on us to kind of sense check those and say, well, did we ask the right questions of the data going in? Did we select that? We've got masses of data. Every single one of us every day is producing vast amounts of data. So I can't remember how much, there is a fact on how much, data has been collected in the world and every day, and it's kind of multiplying on a massive scale. And we're all part of that. And how that's put together and how it's combined, well, that's an ethical issue that we can spend also a long time talking about. But actually how we understand what comes out and that balance between, is this surprising and innovative and something I can really do with, versus actually that does or doesn't match my gut feeling, is really important. And the risk is that because it doesn't validate our gut feelings, we don't do that decision. So we've wasted that massive bit of amazing data that we've spent a lot of time and taken the risk of purchasing and things like that. Or the other option is we go with that decision and we discover that there was something incorrect in the data and we've put a strategy around it. Now they're both big risks. And what we need boards to be doing is to really be looking at data on a risk level and saying, not only risk around the cybersecurity and the data validation, but the risk around so what? And so what is the most important question when it comes to data analysis?
Yeah. And one of the things that I've seen, and I'll use a bit of the COVID situation to explain what I have learned from what you've said, is that traditionally, even for me, when you see risk in data, I always think about people coming in and interfering with that data or taking it away, maybe without even our knowledge. But then the other thing that you're also saying is that there's a risk in how we interpret this data, such that it might expose us as an organization. And when you think about it, countries like, I'm sorry to use this example, like Brazil. So how they have handled COVID, the information they've had, they have made a decision, whatever decision it is they've made. The United States, they have made a decision. Kenya as a country has made a decision. South Africa as a country has made a decision. So some of them have used data to inform their decisions. So what you're saying here is there's also a risk in how data is used. Maybe you can expand on that even as you conclude, and then we give it to Dr. Olukuru. Yeah.
I think, and something we've seen very interestingly in the UK as we started off, I don't know if you saw any of the early UK broadcasts, but it was all the comments that the politicians were saying was, we're using the data, we're talking about the data, and then it went to, we're talking about the science and we're talking to the scientists. And we kind of moved away from the data. Now there's huge debates. We've gone down a couple of levels. We're down to level 3 on our 5 scale points on COVID because the data's told us so. But then you look at the other statistics that are coming out and you're going, well, actually, the government is telling me this and making decisions and allowing me to go to the pub next week and things like that, which is lovely and great. But I'm not sure the data is backing it up based on what we're being told. Now, obviously, I'm only seeing what's available on the BBC. I don't know the ins and outs of what the government are getting. But actually, that understanding that data decisions have consequences, and that might mean that I go to the pub next week, so does everybody else, and we increase our R number, so the spreading rate, because somebody has looked at the data and gone, oh, I'm not sure about that. So it's a big risk.
Okay. Thanks so much, Dr. Masi. That was quite insightful. I've learned something. So Dr. Olukuru, again on analytics, maybe you can help us understand it better?
Yes, Dr. Paul Meunier. I just want to add a few comments listening to Julius and Masi, and I'm like, wow, I think I just need to comment on this. Of course, when you're looking at any given data set, so 3 things have to come in mind. Can we get a hindsight from that data? That is the question which Dr. Masi was commenting. What's happening? Can you look at the data and answer the question, what's happening? But that's not enough. That's just the foundation part. You should go to the next question, why is it happening? So from the descriptive to diagnostic, can you diagnose further to know why this is really happening? And in addition to that is now to look at what's happening now. And that's the insight, okay? I know the hindsight, so can I get the insight? Why is this happening? And you realize, somebody mentioned, knowing what happened is no longer relevant these days. People want to know what's happening now and what will happen in the future, what's happening tomorrow. And that's where people are already concerned. Will there be a second wave? Okay, can we look out at something in addition to that? So there's something maybe we can think through. Predictive analytics, what may happen? And now that's where the models have to come in through. Of course, a very good data scientist will think of what kind of errors might be there. So am I going to have an overfitting problem? Am I having the correct data? Is the data credible? And that's where the data cleaning process is very crucial before even you start fitting in the models. So as Dr. Masio is commenting, you get the output, and this is what's more critical to the board. That at the end of the day, you should be able to ask the right questions, that the EXCO can still go back and come back to you with reliable, credible information, so that now you can utilize that knowledge to make wise decisions. So of course, after you do the predictive, is now the foresight. Okay, you want to optimize your information. So if there's something bad, you want to say it can be prevented. If you predicted something's going to be very good, how can we potentialize on that? How can we make a lot out of it? So I'll break down the whole process of getting wisdom from knowledge, from information into two. First level, getting information of the data. But the next one is also trying to get optimization from the data. How can we optimize from this given data? And just a comment, because you mentioned about what we do as Africans. So being a region now, East Africa, a number of things are happening. I think we've seen Rwanda has been very much ahead in technology. And with that, they're doing a lot. I was in an MIT hackathon recently, and the Minister for Education from Sierra Leone, an ex-MIT, came up with what they're doing with drones already there. And that's the kind of utilization is coming up. But the key thing is to note, Africa is a young continent. It's a continent of the youth. Kenya alone, 75% of our population is the youth. They're under 35%. What are organizations doing? Do we have data? These are internet generation population that we have. They're really working online. Everything they're doing, they're tech savvy. Are we able to tap into that data? Are we able to find the hindsight to see what they know? And since I see a number of people from the insurance companies, from the banks, this is the opportunity to really expand our market base, because each and every customer want to be handled individually. I know my granddad, my papa used to say, there were those days they'll go to the bank and the bank manager knows them individually. I was in UK, you go to RBS, it's just 3 months and the manager knows you, because for them already they were data driven. So big data analytics is now giving us an opportunity. Can I know our customer by individual needs, what they really need? All these messages we get from wherever, come and buy this. I don't need it. Why are you sending it to me? But if you know my need, you send a personalized message to me. So I think COVID has just shown us, can we turn and look at how technology, how digital transformation can help us understand our customer needs? So that's something I should be able to at least comment briefly on analytics. And the data privacy aspect of it, it comes in as a challenge, but from every challenge, there is an opportunity. So how can the board try to support the EXCO to really ensure that our data is really secure? That's the most critical point at the end of the day, that yes, everything we have, we've locked all the possible options that we have and see what we can do. The way Google is trying to say, we can't just have a mobile tracing app out there for COVID victims. First of all, the government has to approve. So what Julius talked about, the data management policy. So it starts with the government. What policy is there on data privacy? And then organization will build on that. And then you realize, what else can we do? And of course, hackers will be there trying all possible wins, but also a challenge, an opportunity for the organization to really do their best.
Right.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lukuru. Dr. Julius Mwangi, do you have any comments based on what has been said before we get into the question and answer? And just as a note, Nonso, if you're available, I'll ask you to ask your question. It's good to hear different voices. I think Nonso is from Southern Africa. Yeah.
So I just want to comment one thing. Thank you, Orukuru and Ruth. When it comes to decision making and the board support and direction of the organization, the board members who are here, one of the issue I know you battle with is the information asymmetry. That moral hazard whereby the executives know more than you, and you are being told to make decisions here and to direct the organization accordingly. One benefit and of the the data analytics, the use of the information and analysis, that it pierces through that information asymmetry. With a good chief data analyst structured well, you'll be able to get what is the insight from the data. So it is upon you to go back, to go consider, implement this data policy and require data strategy. One other thing before you go to the plenary is, I do know when you come to when you talk about the data policies, the data strategy, and the implementation in organization, one of the key role is the management buy-in, the directors buy-in. This is critical. This is a major handicap in moving to it. With the limited budget, you need to be convinced. The more you use the data, the more you make quicker decisions, the more you release the resources in the organization to help you and to direct all the resources to the best areas where you make the maximum value for the organization. So data analysis helps you in the long run, or to an extent in the short run, to do away with the necessary costs and necessary investment, because it directs you to the right area to make the decisions. So I just wanted to mention that. So put budget for it, support, ensure it is part of the organization strategy, and then monitor, and you are going to get value from the same. It is not a nice to have thing. It is almost a must have now in this era of in this new normal of COVID, and everybody using the internet, everybody having gadgets that are collecting data. That's the best thing you can mine. I want to finish by saying that one thing. In addition to having the best and the good employees, the next most valuable resource of an organization, it is data, and more so customer data. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. I don't know whether Nomso is able to ask her a question, actually from Nigeria. Yeah. I'll just read the question. So the question is in two parts. And the second part, I will kindly ask Dr. Ndemo to comment on it, especially because it has some element of regulation. But then both questions also should be open to the panel. I'll ask us to be very, because there's quite a number of questions. So maybe you can take at most a minute. So the first question from Nonso is, how can private and public organizations create effective approaches to their data that are sustainable? And the second one is, what needs to happen in terms of regulation to make it as easy as possible to share data within, between, and outside organizations? Yeah. So Dr. Olukuru, we'll give you the task first.
Dr. Mungai, that's a hard one. Okay.
You can ask
sustainable approaches.
Comment on both. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the regulation one, I think Professor Ndemo will be very well placed to comment on that, since also helping the government to come up with something that line. The key thing for sustainable approach, I'll always go with partnerships, collaboration partnerships, and always having that open data policy. I know the challenge we have in our continent always is the scenario of people fearing to share data. And yesterday I had a speaker in my MBA class from Singapore, and he mentioned the Silicon Valley mentality, that you'll always be paid off in the future. This is what has helped them to really come up with a lot of innovation. I know most of us here were into data science space. You've always known about Kaggle, whereby organization will anonymize their data and place it there and find out what good people can work on it. So I think private, government, and academia will need to come up in a way of developing nice collaborative skill set. So that's something I'll just comment briefly on that.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Dr. Lukuru. Dr. Masi?
Yeah, so a couple of points for me, really. I think there has to be a balance. I mean, when we use Google or we use Facebook and these things, all of these other, mass access tools, we are the fodder for them. We are the ones providing our data. That's how we get the access for free. You know, Facebook doesn't exactly run cheaply, but it's our data that is powering that, which then leads to some really interesting questions around sharing data. So I don't know how aware you are of the Cambridge Analytica scandal that happened in the UK in the run-up to, well, various elections, the American election being one of them, but also our own, and probably the independence referendum as well. But what they were doing was technically, well, debatable, but what they were doing was sort of within the ethos of taking the data that we have freely provided, recutting it and using that to influence our decision making, which is fundamentally what we're all doing with data. Now, you can argue about the rights and wrongs and the legalities of it, and there is court cases going on, so I won't go near that. But that legalities around it are really important, and we're having some really interesting discussions in the UK at the moment, because a lot of people join Facebook before the minimum age of 14, which is the sign-up age for it, and they just put a fake date of birth in. So by the time they get to 18, well, by the time the system thinks they're 18, they're probably only about 14 or 15-year-olds. And under 18s, as children, you're entitled to play and learn and make mistakes and not have it kept on your data record for the rest of your life, aren't you? Or is that a question, you know, is all the children these days in the UK, almost all of our children are being home educated at the moment. They're all Google searching and they're all sharing data all of the time. But when they get to 18, what rights have we got around that data? So we've got this great know your customer. When they're 18 years and 1 day old, you know, we should know all about them. That's great. But actually, we're also entitled to this mistakes period of our life as teenagers. We're all entitled to, you know, make mistakes as teenagers. And how do we wipe that data clean? And it's that balance of what is public and available and usable versus what is private to me, and where do those privacy lines stand? And this is an ethical discussion I'm quite certain that anyone, whether in a classroom or a boardroom, can have for a really long time. And I think when you start talking about those legalities and the sharing of the data and selling other people's data on, what right did Facebook have to sell the data on to Cambridge Analytica, all of these things, it's really important to have those discussions, and I don't have any answers. And I think, to be fair, the biggest problem we've got with data analytics at the moment is, and the ethics around it, is that we don't have answers to those questions.
Right, thank you, Dr. Marcy. Julius, do you have a comment, especially question number 1?
Yes, I just have one comment, because the question is about effective approaches to sustainable data. And I just say, having data, having information will not help you solve the problem, will not help you innovate. What will help you innovate is having a clear framework and a clear strategy and a clear policy on how you use the data to solve your problems. So what I would start with the question is, come out clear, lay out how do you want to use data, and why do you want to use data in that organization, and make it simple. Don't make it complex. Don't go to jargons. Just say, for me to solve this issue, what do I need to know? What insight do I need to have for me to make this decision? And that's how you start using data. Make it simple, because when it becomes complex, when you allow all the techies to guide it, you're gonna get lost in the organization. But if you make it simple, it's going to be entertaining and interesting, and you find yourself solving problems easier than, you know, and let's be an approach coming from a board and management. That have we looked at data? Are we using data to make decisions? That way, it will grow, and as I said, it will mature to a level whereby it will be part and parcel of the whole organization management. Thank you.
Right, thank you. And now I give it to Professor Bitangendemo. He has a lot of insights on this, and probably you can also mention about analytics as well.
Thank you for the opportunity. What I think you were asking with respect to regulation, and I know government has done quite a bit. Some of the work we did in blockchain, AI, was meant to create the infrastructure for the private sector, to leverage some of the government data for making decisions. The technology like blockchain, the shared ledger, that would help, and it does help organizations to validate identity, for example. And that is going to be part of the process. Government realizing that we have a lot that we need to validate. For example, the past elections, people lied, they had degrees from universities. I think by the next elections, every university would have their database ledger, which will be shared, meaning that when you are going to run for office, they would simply ask you for permission. And this is part of the data protection. Permission that they look for they validate the data you have given them, meaning that they will check the university, they would check the criminal record, they will check the tax record with your permission, And when you agree, you have these smart contracts that you sign. These are the principles for blockchain. And of course, you would understand that there is consensus ahead. You are a part and parcel of the process. You cannot turn around and change. My fear in the private sector is that we are discussing this much too late. We could be very late in the sense that some of the platform companies have gone ahead of us and taken a lot of data that they can easily destroy the existing enterprises much more easily. And if you look at Facebook, for example, they're investing heavily on infrastructure. And what they are doing with the infrastructure is that by the time the infrastructure is ready, places like our place here, our undersea infrastructure will be getting to a point of being decommissioned. And what Facebook is doing is that we can swap. We swap, I give you capacity, and give me the eyeballs of your citizens. And that completely undermines all enterprises because they will be collecting data directly from the customer. So when we discuss these big data issues, we should also be talking more about emerging business models so that we can solve the problem much more deeply. So I say we are slightly late because people did not think about the fourth industrial revolution and those technologies. Now that COVID has forced us, we need to expand this knowledge. People begin to discuss it openly. Where do we use this? How do we use it? For example, I said earlier that let's begin to digitize everything, because it is from digitization that you can actually create both structured and unstructured data that we require. So that's the much I can make. Today I was supposed to be a listener because...
But yes, I agree. But just on the issue of regulation,
yes.
How can the private sector, for instance, work collectively? Are there things that they need to be enabled with, either a government regulation? Are there things that might be prohibiting them, or is it?
There's going to be a number of legal sandboxes. If you begin to bring regulation before the innovations come out, you would restrain innovation. That's why we created multiple legal sandboxes. There's a legal sandbox in CMA, there'll be a legal sandbox in this. And if we move towards this blockchain, then it's possible that if you want to mash up data from Kenya breweries versus Safaricom, they can agree on monetizing the data so that they know how many people from what area who drink heavily and stuff like that. These are the predictions. And I think a data analyst would be useless in your organization if you don't ask the right questions, because they would also be looking at that data and give you the basics. But it's important we begin to ask, as boards, to ask questions. How can I know that people would steal from here? And then we begin to look at what tools we deploy, AI tools, so that we gather the data, look at the behavior, and then we are able to predict. For example, government, the Auditor General should never be asking what happened. I mean, how much money was stolen. He should actually be knowing that there is a potential of this resource being stolen because of ABCD.
Right.
So these are the questions that we must begin to ask.
Okay, right. Thanks, Professor. Now, I don't know whether Ben Roberts can be able to ask. He's been very active on chat and making us laugh here. There's one person who has become a victim. I'll not mention who. Is it possible? Let me see whether his mic has been enabled. I don't think so. Ben says an issue we grapple with, I think, in big data company, so is that data ownership remains in silos. So networks team own and understand network data, customer service owns and understands call center data. So these are just examples of the silos. And how does the company chief data officer get to know and understand so many data sets from disparate departments and envisage what insights will come from combining data sets? How do they get different teams to change their naming formats to make them easily interoperable between other departments' data? I think this is a question to Dr. Lukuru. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I think, yeah, that question will have taken like a whole day to explain a few things there, because first of all, that tells you the level at which the organization is. So sorry to say, it could still be at level 1, where the value of data is still, people are not really aware of it. So we say it's still an aware level, and they need to go 4 more levels before they get to transformative level of utilization of data. So unaware, making data being opportunistic, comprehensive reporting, the enterprise level, before they can get to transformative. So just maybe in brief, because I know time is a bit not on our side, one key thing, and that's what I began with, culture. Why are we having data in silos? It's because people want to hoard what they're trying to have in their own department. So if at the beginning of everything, people understand the value they're giving to the company, they'll open it up. So the starting point is change your company culture. And that will help you now get people embraced when you say we want to unify our data management systems. So if people buy the idea, now the unification of data management systems comes in. But that also means somebody should be able to understand the company very well. There's something we're doing for local circle, and that's one key thing. We have to spend on training just to get people to understand the value of data, their value in the whole entire chain of their data processing up to decision making before we went to making up their data management system. So those are 2 things I'll just comment. Then of course, look at the data integration capabilities, okay? Because sometimes you have all this because people have a different range of CRM systems, the email marketing system, the social media automation system. How can they be integrated? So if people can look at that and they say, fine, there's a possibility of integrating all that, that also starts up to break up the silos. Of course, those are 3 things that can help us get up there, but there's one is to get it started, remove the silos, and then maintain it. Because we'll break the silos, but people still go back to their old tradition. I always have this kind of a thought. People don't refuse to share data. People don't refuse to open up their silos, but they fear what the data has to tell out there. So if we provide that culture where people are free, they know very well, it's my role to get credible data. Whatever little mistake is there, it's all for the whole organization to resolve it. That becomes something very good. So after setting up, watch out how to prevent, again, the silos being stacked up. So the idea is, can you ensure that it doesn't rise in future again? And of course, have clear expectations. So from the data strategy, the data management policy, it will provide a very good, maybe could say, vision of what expectations you have as an organization going forward. But I'll say the denominator is culture.
Right. And also to add to that, I think borrowing from what Dr. Julius said, I think you need a simple strategy, a simple working strategy from the board that helps to govern that. Because if the senior executive is making the company move in a certain direction, then that definitely happens. Dinesh, are you able to ask Karibu Sana?
Can I just jump in before we move on to the next question?
Yes. Yeah,
just
sure.
A very small thing. So for 11 years, I was in industry being a business continuity manager. One of the jobs I had to do there was go around all the departments and ask them what's critical and what they needed recovering after an incident. And they would always mention their data sets. So a very quick and easy way of figuring out what data sets you've got is go and ask your business continuity manager, because they will know, because they would have put recovery plans in place. And often we don't think about bringing the business continuity manager into other business decisions, but they have a wealth of data. I mean, I remember working at Citigroup, for example, and finding out just what all the different data sets were across that needed recovering. And same when I was at Swiss Re and Ernst & Young for the clients. So really, really quick tip there for your chief data officer is go and find the business continuity manager. They'll have a lot of the data you need.
Right. Thanks, Dr. Masi. So now that's someone else that has been introduced in this conversation. So we have the CDO, Chief Data Officer, and then we have the Business Continuity Officer. And now we can see how important their roles are in this transformation. Over to you, Dinesh.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very clearly.
Yeah, I will not shy away from saying that most of us are in a position where I call DRIP, and DRIP, data rich, information poor. And we collect data all the time. We collect data from different parts of our business. We collect data from our different businesses, which are not similar. So we have hospitality industry we are in, and we are also in the motor industry, we're in the manufacturing, and that is collected all over the place. I'm thinking, and it's a matter of time before every organization would have probably a data officer or data chief officer, whatever it is. But what's the starting point in having a very structured, way of saying, this is the journey where we are now. We have a lot of data. We've been in business for 50 years, and what is a structured way of saying that we now? How do we get all this data together and convert into relevant information that would help us drive our business? Is it an independent business review by a consultant who comes in and says, guys, this is where all your data is lying? Is it we do it internally? We have internal resource, but we don't see us moving at the speed that we need to move.
Right. Okay. I think I'll start with Julius.
Well, thank you. Let me attempt to answer this question, because it's a question of how do you start implementing data in an organization, knowing that you have a lot of data collected all over, or we do not know that you have a lot of data. I did say we start being simple in this new era, the new post-COVID or COVID era. I don't think we have a lot of leeway to hire so many people to come to the organization. We may be wanting to limit or freeze that hiring element. So how do you start? I wanted us to start simple. Start using data in solving the current problems you have. Ask simple questions. What data do we have to enable us innovate or solve the problems we have? That's a simple starting point. But if you want to structure it properly, you need to have the policy on the data and accept you mature slowly. You not mature on the data utilization organization one touch. You're not probably like the Safaricom's, the other very good organization using a lot of data, or like where Ruth is coming from UK and the US overnight. you will have to have a maturity towards that, that data utilization. So what I would ask is, first of all, there's a buy-in from the leadership and the board that we need to start using data, and the data we have, because data you have already, to use it to make decisions and to solve the problems that occur, and to innovate and to develop new product, either service related or product related, from the data we have. And then you come up with a policy and you start there. But if you have some budget, it's always good to have an expert who can guide you through the process. But I do believe within every organization, we have people who can assist in starting the process, and thereafter you continuously run until you reach a position where you can get a full framework and a maturity level of data becoming the data utilization and analytics becoming the guiding thing. I think that's my attempted answer to that.
Dr. Masi, do you have a response to Dinesh, or rather to add to what Julius has said?
I think just to add to it, really. So I think for me, we have all these pots of data across organisations, and we know that's where we are. Is actually by starting small and saying publicly to the company, from this data set, we managed to do this, and celebrate that success. And then other people will go, well, actually, I've got a data set that can overlay on that. We can do a bigger thing. And actually, there's that cultural change. So if you look at something like Kotter's model of change, for example, one of the things he strongly advocates is to celebrate these small successes and acknowledge that change is a long-term process. And this is what we're talking about. This isn't about the use of data. This is about changing our organizational focus to look at that data. So we're talking about a big change program, and culture is, as we've already acknowledged, a massive part of that. But celebrating those small successes and articulating to the rest of the organization that we have this data set, in broad terms, this is what we did with it, this is the value that added to the company. Then ask the broad question of, have you got anything in your part of the organization we could do something similar with? And grow from there. If you want a quick win, then absolutely get a consultant in to do this. That'll be an expensive way of doing it, but it is a quicker way of doing it. But if you want to change that culture, you need to make sure that you're taking it from the inside and moving it forward as well. So just short answer from me.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Masi. Dr. Lukuru.
Yes, thanks, Paul. Let me just comment briefly. It's one of the final comments I always give when we are doing the SMLP or AP training, and we have a data science module or data analytics module, or even when we are talking to the board of directors. And I always leave them with something: can they get started? How do they get started? As Dr. Masi has mentioned, start small. Start small. Pick a business unit to be the testing ground. Pick a department. We were helping out one of the hotel chains around in Nairobi, and we just looked at one front office and what kind of data set was there. And we helped them to see the descriptive analytics. Moved on now to do just a simple dashboard. After it was appreciated, we moved on to the next. So pick a business unit, let it be your testing ground. And then after that, challenge now each key function to identify a business opportunity. What business opportunity can people pick out from there? Now, the practical side is the implementation. And that's why sometimes people look at the cost as a challenge. And my VC, the Signet, always tells us, money is never the problem. You just need to think. Just think and get out of there to get people to help you. When we were beginning our data science center here, I'm looking forward to launch our master's in data science. We had a kind of shuttle diplomacy. We went to a number of cities all over. And when we were in Boston, we were so impressed that MIT was supporting a number of companies, both startups and full-grown companies in data analytics. So I think the partnership with academia is what we are still not yet good in Africa. I was in Bristol, the same thing. Bristol City is an AI machine learning city, but Bristol University is supporting most of the organizations there. We went to Wall Street, NYU with the data camp. They're doing a number of things. And I think academia provides the easiest way possible out for any company starting out something, because students, PhD students, professors want to do research, and the only thing they need is data. So you work with them, they sign up their MBAs, wherever it could be, and they'll help you open up your little wings that you want to be getting over there. So partnership with academia. Of course, the key thing is go for open source tools. Yeah, don't think of going to buy all these ERPs and whatever it could be. Start with open source tools. Those ones will give you the quick wins for everyone to appreciate, and there'll be a proper good, I could say, appreciation culture, and things will change. So that's the little I could comment on that. But Dinesh, you can speak of the webinar.
Sorry, I got one more thing. What I meant, look, we all use data.
Okay.
We are widespread, and what mine is that we're having data all over the place in different businesses, and there's information everywhere from that data. And how do we consolidate this and optimize on the data? That's my question. It's not being used in the individual business units, but there's common data captured at different sources and different parts of the business. So how do we bring this together to have, more information and by consolidating the data which is all over the place?
I think, Paul, can I go? Can I comment briefly on that? Yes.
We comment. We are over time by 4 minutes, so I will kindly ask us for an additional 10 so that we can exhaust. And how we'll do this is for each of the other questions, only one person will respond so that at least we're able to address all the questions. Yeah, so back to you, Dr. Olukuru.
Okay, Dinesh, I think it was in line with what Ben Roberts has asked, because what you're trying to say is like this data has different units and utilizing them. So bring them together, you need a data management system. That's the key scenario. But now it requires you to see if people will be willing to now break down the silos and integrate that. That's the challenge you have at the end of the day. You'll need to go for a data management system, then get people all coming on together. And with one data management system, you can end up having one single visualization, which will be a dashboard. You'll be able to have predictive models all picking up data from one particular point. And by the way, before I forget, because time is going on, I owe this always to Bob Colimo. He gave me a different understanding of AI, augmented intelligence, getting people to support machine to get more out of what the models are trying to do. And he began something which I hope many organizations can take it up. Look for talent in-house. You have wonderful employees who just need to be empowered, and those guys will do wonders. So look for a champion. Who can you identify in your organization who really thinks data, sleeps data, and can do wonders with data? That champion is the one who can get the rest of the people to break down the silos. That champion is the one who will be able to say, we need to get this data management system. This is what fits us. I know for this hospitality company, they had a nice data management system, but the challenge is it's a vendor who sold to them. So some of the data, they will not access. When you want to access it, you have to pay for it. But you have an in-house person, the way Safaricom is training their own employees, they will develop projects. They come up with projects that goes back to the company. They know where it pains them. So they will not go for the vendor. They will do it themselves. So empower your own employees, let them get the skill set, and they will see the bigger picture on how to put all that data together.
Right. Okay, thanks, Dr. Olukuru. So I don't know whether Arnold is there. If not, I will ask the question. And I will ask 2 questions at a go. Is Arnold there? Okay, not. So the question is, what is Kenya's position in terms of data management and safety? And what legal framework exists to protect our data out there, especially with so many apps harvesting our data, even at times without our knowledge? One of you, the first person to speak, take the question. Okay, no from Dr. Mercy, Julius.
Yes, I can say something. I think that question has been answered by Ben. The Kenya Data Protection Act 2019 as a legal framework has been answered. So we can go ahead from there.
Thank you for that. So
also see Communications Authority has what they call an incident reporting. They monitor which kind of viruses are coming. So if you want, you can call them. They would let you know that prepares you for whatever that is coming.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Thanks, Professor Ndemo. Yeah, that's quite insightful as well. So then there's a question from James. When management is developing a data management policy, what are some of the key details it should contain? Now, someone is asking about the details of the strategy you guys are talking about. So maybe just a quick 1 minute at most response. Sorry?
Pays them, they would give him the strategy.
It's a consultancy. That's a consultancy question.
But we can have a simple, because the question has been asked, Dr. Paul.
Okay.
You just the key things is the responsibility. Who is responsible? Who can access what data? We call that framework elastic. Differentiating. There are some people who just need to know the information. There are some people who are responsible. There are some people who create. So it's a complete. As Professor Demo is saying, somebody should pay for it, but it's just those basics. And what do you want to achieve with the data? There's a policy, and who can change this policy, and who can generate this data, and who can use it in the organization? Because there's another question down there about the HR data, and people keep on changing. So you have to have what Dr. Ruth was saying about the clearly analysis of the risks that are involved with having centralized data of an organization. How do you put the controls around all those risks? So those are kind of the items that you put in the policy. Just a quick answer for that.
Yeah, just to jump in there and answer Patrick's question, which is a couple further down about HR data. The answer to that is basically horses for courses, which sounds like a terrible answer. Something like current address of a current employee, you'll need to keep for the length of the time the employee is there, but something like their pension data, you need to keep until their last dependent that gets a payment out of the pension scheme is gone. So actually, it's not black and white. It's not. It's for each set of data what is appropriate. So I think that adds to Julius's point and answers Patrick's hopefully as well. It's about thinking specifically about those bits of data, not just the whole data set.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Massey. And there's a question I think that Dr. Ndemo wanted to answer, a question that's asking, would you say there might be a conflict that may arise between AI and data protection acts worldwide? It's a very interesting question.
I think the answer to that is we already have.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big problems. The problem with things like Data Protection Act and things like that is based on ethics, and ethics are a very deep insiders kind of concept, and our laws are that codification of that ethics. And every country has a different codification around it. That's why we all have our own legal frameworks. And so AI that's working worldwide, which is kind of how we, the best AI data sets come from really large data sets, scraping from across the world. They're going to inevitably impact on those cultural norms in each of those cultures, and therefore that will cause a conflict, and we've already seen some of that happening.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Massey. I think that we should come to an end now because the borrowed time has expired. So maybe just 1 minute. I want to give the panelists just 1 minute to conclude. I think you guys have had a very good time as well, over and above making contributions. I think we've all had a very, very fruitful engagement. So probably I'll start with Dr. Massey, and then Julius, and then Dr. Olukuru. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go really short on this and say that I think the most important thing you've got to think about is, why do you hold that piece of data? If you can answer that question and it's a valid reason, then hold it, great, use it. If you've got the authorities to do it, great. If you don't have the authorities and you don't need it, don't hold it.
Yeah,
so
right.
Short and sweet from me.
Thank you. Dr. Julius?
I'll conclude by saying one simple thing. to the leadership that is here, and to the board, and to the management that is here, and all those who are listening, who are doing the consultancy. I will just ask you one thing. As Kennedy wanted Americans to go to the moon after being defeated by the Russians going earlier to the moon than the Americans. Go back to your organization, rally the management, rally the board, explain to them. Let us utilize the data that you have in the organization to make quality decisions, and to ask what else do we need, and we move from there. We are already in the world of data analytics. As Professor Demo has said, those of us in the private sector, we are coming in a bit late, but we will catch up and we will drive the whole discussion. Thank you.
I like the enthusiasm. We'll catch up. Thank you.
Yes.
Dr. Lukuru.
Thank you very much, Paul. I think it was a wonderful session. Just a concluding quote or comment. Of course, we always know people talk about in God we trust, the rest bring data. But also remember, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And of course, sometimes some wonderful CEOs will say, without data, I am the boss, because you'll depend on my experience. So therefore, there will always be people who are ahead of the curve. Yeah. There will also be people who are behind the curve. I'm not sure where you are with the organization, but remember, knowledge that's come from the information, that comes from the data, is what moves the curve. Thank you.
Right, thank you. And my last comments before I give it to Nancy, who's going to give the vote of thanks on behalf of the business school, is that let us not wait until we are disrupted or forced out of business. Let us start taking advantage. There are concerns, for instance, like Dinesh raised, where he said that we have data, but you're not using it. Let us start using that data. If you're a chief data officer, let it not be what Ben was saying, that there's a chief data officer who's not gone to him. Make sure that you approach the executive so that you start discussing how data can be used for strategic advantage and also competitive advantage. Thanks so much, everyone, for participating. We actually had a very large number all the way to the very end. Nancy, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dr. Mungai. That was such a wonderful session. Strathmore is famous or infamous for keeping time. However, for this session, I think we appreciate you for accepting us to extend just a little bit. I'd like to appreciate our wonderful panelists and the moderator for unpacking this topic. It was quite intense and you've done a wonderful job. To the participants, thank you for also taking the time to sit in for this session. We appreciate you. This has been part of a series that we started this month from 2nd of June. And all these sessions have been recorded and will be available on our website and also on YouTube. In case you missed any of the sessions, you can just go to YouTube and just click on Strathmore University Business School webinar series, and they'll be lined up and you'll be able to see what you may have missed out. The next session is on screen. We are planning to have one specific for our corporation secretaries or company secretaries. I will be talking on the role of the company secretary for the future board. So for all those who are here, please ensure that you join us and also share the word out there. In the month of August, we are planning to have another series, and this will be also quite specific to the public sector boards. And this is after a lot of feedback had been received from you who attended the sessions on can we have something for the public sector boards. And so we are organizing one on the first week of August. So I'll be talking about effective leadership and governance of public sector boards. And after that, on regulatory authorities. We'll be having a topic on that. So thank you so much. Stay tuned. We'll send you an email just appreciating you and telling you what is next. So feel free to reach us in case you have any further questions, clarifications, always reach out to us. So thank you so much and be blessed. Enjoy the rest of your evening or day, depending on which part you're from. Thank you.